This would be more sanctions if you don't go ahead and close the deal.
Well, at some point we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we can live with and be reasonably confident that Iran is not in a position to use the nuclear weapon in some fashion that gives it some benefit. Unless one becomes a believer that the Iranians are hell-bent on committing suicide, and therefore the moment they have the first allegedly bomb, they'll attack Israel. One has to ask oneself, is the assumption behind that this country is totally suicidal, that the leadership wishes the country to be destroyed, is going to attack with the first assumed nuclear weapon a country which has 200 nuclear weapons and has the capacity to deliver them? I think at some point we'll have to think about that dilemma. And I'm of the view that at some point, probably in the course of these negotiations, as they're being finalized, we will have to go more on record, that is to say the United States, that we will, under any circumstance of a threat from Iran directed at Israel, react the same way we would have reacted at any threat by the Soviet Union at Europe, our principal ally, or the same way as we're still committed to reacting on behalf of the Japanese or the Koreans, South Koreans, if threatened by North Korea. That is to say that that action is tantamount to an attack on the United States. Now, this is a further reinforcement of a situation in which Iran may end up with a nuclear program. And the nuclear program may always have some potential for breakout. But it provides, I think, a reassurance. And in that context, it's also useful to remind ourselves that achieving a nuclear capability is much more complicated than having a theoretical capability for making a weapon. And there's sort of a public assumption, which has been fostered to some extent by Netanyahu, that the Iranians are just months away from having a weapon. But the point is, having a weapon doesn't mean anything. If you have a so-called weapon, first of all, you have to test it. You better make sure it works if you're intent on committing effective suicide. That is to say, to take a lot of other people with you. Then secondly, you have to have a delivery system that is reliable. So it has to be tested too. And then thirdly, presumably, unless you're totally, totally suicidal, which is hard to assign as a characteristic of a nation of 80 million people that's endured for 3,000 years, you have to have some sense that you want to have a capacity to retaliate if you are struck. Now, all of that will take an enormous amount of time to achieve. So what I'm trying to say is, even if we're not positioned in a perfect way to achieve a truly, truly, absolutely foolproof agreement with the Iranians that in effect precludes them from being co-equal with a lot of other nuclear generating nations, we have that option. And I think we ought to exercise it on behalf of stability in the region and guarantee not just Israel, which may be offended by being guaranteed by us, but anyone in the region whom the Iranians could threaten with their nuclear weapons. And let me make one final point. What we don't really pay much attention to, that the fact is that the real nuclear player in that region is someone else. It's not Iran, and in my judgment, it's not going to be soon. Pakistan. Pakistan has a lot of nuclear weapons, and it's increasing the range of its delivery capabilities. That is food for thought.
Bach, I just add something to what Zbig pointing made.